What's up, guys? I'm Ming the Merciless in 93, back with part 2. And we are still in the same session, getting dealt King Deuce here. What is this? Is that where it's recording? Did I accidentally move that? Alright, we're going to move this back to where it was. Because I know it was in the... Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. That's crazy. We'll go ahead and defend in the big blind with our king and our deuce of diamonds. Not too much going on this flop. Let me get that right down where it needs to be. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. We are just going to go check fold here. If we had a higher king, then we would go ahead and defend with a backdoor flush draw and king high on an ace high board, which gets c-bet at a high frequency. In this spot, we're just going to check and fold, though. But yes, welcome back to PokerVIP.com, Global Poker, Ming the Merciless 93 on Twitch. And we'll see what this session brings us. We were talking in the last session just about thinking through hands and considering both sides of the coin. When I have an option to do one thing or another, what would make sense? You know, if I'm going to be betting, what are the benefits to betting versus checking? And then what do the experts say? What does balance say? What do the solvers say? Just sort of taking everything in before you make your decision. Queen 7 offsuit is a perfectly reasonable raise on the button. We're going to play a little bit tighter. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing a little bit tighter. Raising Queen 8 for sure, so Queen 7 is kind of bottom of the barrel there. But Spirit seems to be kind of on the loose side, and Queen 7 doesn't have great playability. Playability is important. At the end of the day, when you're looking at all these solvers and you're looking at all this very, very finely calculated data, and it's just coming down to the 1% equity, I have enough with this exactly, this exactly, but I don't have enough with this exactly. You know, there's going to be other factors and other variables. I mean, the way that your hand accrues equity and realizes equity is important. So clearly you could play more hands against a weaker opponent who doesn't put much pressure on you and allows you to realize more equity. And you can't play as many hands against a guy who's giving you a lot of decisions that are tough. He's putting a lot of pressure on you, and you're not going to realize equity as often, so you should play a little tighter and probably 3-bet a bit more against that type of opponent. So there's, you know, when the equities all run so close, then the post-flop play and how things are going is going to be very important. Here we have the king of clubs and the gut shot. So we're just going to go ahead and call. He could have a 6, he could have a 10, he could have a jack. For this sizing, he could have pretty much anything. On the turn, we have a choice between raising or not. And I think we can go ahead and raise here, given that we might win the pot now. We might hit a queen or a club and then get a nice bet on the river. It just ends up being a pretty good spot for us to raise the turn and then barrel some rivers against shag. Now, once he calls on the turn, a 10 is not a great card because a jack and a 10 and a 6 with a club, something like ace of clubs 6, are the exact kind of hands he's going to have. So we would really be hoping that he'd fold a lot on the river. So we're going to end up just checking back here. In this case, he has pocket 8s with no club at all. So that was an extremely wide call on the turn, and we probably would have gotten a fold on the river. But I have to tell you, if the guy called with that weak of a combination on the turn, then there's a good chance that he wasn't going to fold on the river. I can't tell you that with exact certainty. And if we're going to raise that turn with a blocker to the flushes, then certainly bluffing that river is not bad. However, I think that when he does bet a very small amount, and he calls it raise on the turn, he mostly has one pair hands, and he doesn't have as many flushes. And as you can see, he had a one pair hand, even though it was a crazy one to have in that spot. I don't think he's going to fold a jack on the river. I don't think he's ever going to fold a 10. Maybe there's a small fraction of those stronger hands in his range, but it just generally seems like the only hand we'd really be getting him to fold on the river would be a one pair hand lower than the jack and the 10. So maybe something like a 6 is what, you know, would make the most sense. A 6 with a club, 6 with the queen of clubs, 6 with the ace of clubs, a few of those combos. But I think that if he's willing to call the turn there, we might have gotten called on the river as well. So it'll just be interesting to note that his range is that wide, and that is what shag is willing to do. So that is something that can be exploited, is that small bet sizing. So now we can overbet the river as a bluff, and we can make smaller bets on the river with a wider range for value to try to get calls from that really wide pair range, and then try to get the folds when we're putting more pressure on him, and then just go from there. And, you know, who knows? Maybe he folds a ton to the small bet, and we would rather use that sizing with our bluffs for some reason, and maybe he calls a bunch to the overbet because he's just a psychopath, and we'd rather use that sizing exploitatively with all of our better hands. So, I mean, as a general strategy, a bigger bet should get more folds than a smaller bet. But if our opponents start doing real weird Twilight Zone type shit, we might have to adjust our ranges, adjust our bet sizes to line up with different parts of our range. Our hand is good here quite frequently. We've got, well, we're going to lose to Queen Jack and sets, of course, but I think that we're just going to end up having to call shag down with as loosely as he's playing. And now we have a full house on a card that makes him a flush. So honestly, you could lead out this river against a lot of opponents, but I think against shag, he'll probably still value bet all kinds of stuff. What do we lose to here? We lose to Queen Jack. Is there any reason to think that he has exactly Queen Jack? When he overbets like this, it's real weird. I think we're just going to call because we definitely don't have the nuts. And it seems in this scenario, we definitely could have gotten more value by raising, but at the same time, it's not very... Okay, so I guess I have to kind of... I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. So the thought process of a guy who would bet call pocket eights on that previous hand is probably going to be the type of player who's not going to necessarily be aware that the board is paired on the river. So when he overbets there, the Queen of Clubs is a great card for us because it makes us a boat when he can make flushes. In this spot, we decided to just call because we do lose to Queen Jack, and that's about it, right? And there's not that many combos of Queen Jack in the deck. There's only 3 of them. So at the end of the day, I probably should have just raised that river and just eaten the loss if we got coolered. But it's such a weird spot to see a guy double overbet on the Queen, and it is congruent with the way that he would play it. And, you know, but if you look at the hands that we can beat, we can beat pocket 3s, we can beat pocket jacks, we obviously beat the one combo of pocket 5s in the deck, and we beat all the flushes. So out of all the hands that this guy might decide to be betting with, we beat a very high frequency or a high percentage of those hands, not to mention the fact that we saw him just make a really wide call on the turn when he made, but again, he made a very small bet. And this time he made a very big bet, which is why I was also a little bit spooked that, you know, maybe he's not overbetting the turn with a flush draw, and we'll take it down with ace-king on the side there. So I think that right there, if I'm looking back at my play based on him making a very light call and then him having very few combos that beat us, I think that with queens full of 5s, we really did make a mistake there. Well, you guys didn't, but I did. I made a big mistake in that spot. I acted a little bit quickly. I should have thought it out a little bit more. And I was just like, we're just going to call and see what this guy's got here. Looks like it's Queen Jack. Looks like the nuts. But, you know, honestly, that's a very, very bad, very bad. Should have thought it out just a little bit longer and definitely ended up raising that river. And who knows, maybe he would have folded his flush, but I doubt it. I don't think he would have. So don't make that type of a mistake. I think we can definitely fold to him making it $4 to go here, though, for sure. But yeah, the big bet, it seemed congruent with the way that he would play that combo, but he'd probably play a lot of hands that way, clearly overplayed his 8, made a super light call, so it would make sense for him to make a light call on the river, which means it's pretty difficult for us to not end up loving our scenario where we, you know, you basically have him destroyed on that club. So playing fast, we make a mistake. With the information that we have, we make a mistake, but you know, it's okay. Even the best players in the world make mistakes all the time. What can I attribute my mistake to? Not slowing down and just thinking a little bit longer. You know, I was so surprised at him overbetting the river that I was just like, let's call and see what he has rather than what makes the most sense. And as you can see, I'm just like, well, we only really lose to Queen Jack, and he can have a bunch of you know, flushes in this spot. So if I had thought a little bit longer, we definitely would have raised there, and maybe we wouldn't have shoved, but it looks like a spot where we probably would have shoved. We at least would have made it like 9 or something like that. Tried to force the value bet through, but I think it would have worked at a high frequency. So yeah, take your time, and don't be afraid to admit your mistakes. That's another thing that's, you know, it's kind of a good point to touch on, is that everyone makes mistakes, and you're going to be able to tell the difference between a clear mistake and then something that's speculative. We'll just get out of the way there. Be 3-betting here because there, again, there's a lot of scenarios that can be played with a mixed strategy. That I don't think is a mixed strategy. I think that is a specific, just a very specific raise and nothing else. We're going to raise it up here with our pocket sevens. We get the 3-bet through with ace king. And this board texture, we are going to go ahead and make a small protection continuation bet. I want it to be smaller. All right, we're just going to go with half pot since I'm timing down. They don't have a third pot button, but I would bet generally a little bit smaller here. And that is not a great card, so we're just going to check. But yeah, being able to admit your mistakes, you know, it's not only a humble thing to do, but it's also a way that you will become the best player that you can be. Because how would it benefit me to be arrogant and prideful and say, you know what, that was definitely a good fair call on that river. Immediately, I hated that call. So immediately, I want to ask myself, why did I make that call? Why did I make that call versus make that raise? Make a note of that, use awareness of that to have a better thought process in the future and play more efficiently. And I think the primary factor there for me is that I just didn't take my time with my decision. The overbet surprised me, and we didn't take our time, and we made a poor decision. So I think that is a good way to sort of get better in general. Reason both sides out, and if we go back and we use that, look at both sides, you know, raising the river, our benefit is that we beat all of his flushes, we beat if he randomly has trip queens, and it also makes sense for him to increase his bet size on the turn if he just hit a queen rather than queen jack, so maybe he ends up with just trips on that river and dominated boats and flushes, and there's tons of those combinations versus just losing to queen jack. So if you even think about that another 15 seconds, it's very difficult for us to find a way to just call on that river. So if you argue both sides of it for just calling or just raising, I think just raising is going to win like 100% of the time. And it's not going to be close. So just the big mistake there was timing. I didn't take my time with my decision. I made a second best decision because I didn't take my time, and then go from there. So the next time I'm in a spot, I'll just, you know, have at the forefront of my thought process, or in general I do, take my time with this decision. You know, take a little bit longer. If you think you've made your decision, then double check that shit. It doesn't cost you much of anything for an extra 5 or 10 seconds of, is this exactly what I want to do? Especially live. And I think that you end up getting that organically live a little bit easier, just because live you have to push the chips out. You have to cut the chips out. You have to push them out over the line. And I think that you get a little bit more of that. Let me make my decision a little bit more cautiously before you put the chips out there. And you can still catch yourself kind of having, you know, a worse thought process than other times. Maybe if you're having a bad session, you might be frustrated and you might make a decision a little bit too quickly, or you might have already thought it through on a previous street, so you just act again very quickly, not paying attention to every piece of information that you have in front of you. So I'm actually glad that I made that mistake there, both for myself and for you guys, because you guys can learn from that mistake, and I can also learn and keep reinforcing. Because the thing is that when you learn and you get better, you know, you have a muscle memory where you just do things naturally. I know to 3-bet this combo. I know to use this bet sizing in this spot, and all of that's fine, and it's all well and dandy. But honestly, taking your time with decisions is extremely important, because it's what allows you to get through those spots where you don't necessarily have the exact muscle memory or something surprise you. Like clearly, if he makes a regular bet size on that river, I'm raising every single time. So what caught us off guard is that he made an abstract bet sizing. He overbet the turn, he overbet the river, and we just didn't give ourselves enough time to think it through. But that's okay, because that's easily fixed. And yeah, okay, he's checking down a pair in that spot. Fair enough. Easily fixed, and it's good. It's good to sort of have those things happen. Otherwise, how are you going to know what you need to work on if you don't make mistakes? You know, you're not a perfect player. And we would have isolated there. Honestly, we should have isolated that. Take your time, dummy. And that'll reward us with aces over here on the other table. See if we can get a 3-bet out of spirit on this one. We'll be 4-bet bluffing with our aces. Looks like we are going to get a flat call from him, if not a 3-bet. Jack 5-7, relatively disconnected board. We'll just go with the half-pot continuation bet sizing, folding the 10-5. can't really complain about winning that pot. Ace deuce offsuit's going to be a fold. But yeah, even the best players, the reason why they became them is because they got really good at all the different variables and all the different things that make up being one of the best players. If you look at all of the best players and you sort of see the trends between them, then you'll see that there's a lot of congruent things that are happening. The ace deuce offsuit, not a combo we're going to be playing here. 8-10 offsuit, that's too early of a position to play that one, so we're going to get the hell out of dodge with this guy. Get a raise from Dr. Rungood on table 2. See if he can get some action. Ace-9 offsuit. We play in this combination at some frequency. And we will be defending the big blind here, even though it's not amazing. It's reasonable. We have the ace of clubs here, block ace, king, and aces. And we also have a backdoor straight draw. Not a bad spot to either be calling or check raising. That is a very big bet, and the other player calls in position. I think we're just going to go ahead and try to bluff him in this spot. Not always going to work, but we do have a very good hand to do this with, specifically blocking aces and ace-king, and having backdoor straight and nut flush draws. You know, shag can call here. You know, we know he calls very wide, so this is kind of the perfect spot to prey on that width of range. And we get basically the worst card in the deck. We don't pick up a straight draw. We don't pick up a flush draw. We're drawing dead every 7 which ways. So now we're just going to give up. That's okay. It was a good spot to be bluffing for sure. Get a check over here, a check over there. And we're just going to continue giving up in this spot. Not really going to be winning. I'd assume that someone has a pair, even something like 6-7 is probably not folding at this point. But this is a particularly good combination to be check raise bluffing the flop with. And it looks like shag had an open-ended straight draw. And he got there. The other guy called, which means the other guy probably had some sort of king and just played it passively after we raised. So unfortunate for us that we check raised into a pair and a straight draw, but a pretty reasonable hand to be check raising with, and it's pretty good to be giving up. If the turn was a club, we would have just bet the turn and bomb the river like psychopaths if we didn't get there. If we hit a straight draw, probably check a little bit more than go bananas. The club is the card that we're really going bananas on. King 10 offsuit, we are going to raise this up a lot. It looks like we got shag limping on in again. Go ahead and isolate him. Get called by Gamma, who's probably pretty pissed off about losing that last pot. Re-raised by Spirit, who's just been sitting there doing not much of anything, so we're going to get the hell out of dodge. Our hand lacks the playability to continue. Raise it up with King Queen on the button on the other table. We would have flopped trips here, but that's not necessarily good. They got queens, and they got ace king, and all kinds of shit that beats King 10 here. So even though we have a good hand in part, it's not amazing. So Dr. Rungood seems to be kind of a passive dude, and then the other guy flats. Yeah, I'm not super excited about this. I'm just going to go ahead and fold the King Queen. I think King Queen is a variable strategy there. You can 4-bet with it against the right players, and you can also call. Definitely calling if it's suited, but if it's offsuit, you're not really going to want to play it in a spot where someone has a stronger range than normal. We haven't seen much aggression from Dr. Rungood, and you know, Spirit certainly doesn't seem to be over-calling 3-bets a bunch or anything like that. I think our King Queen is firmly dominated a lot of the time between these two opponents, and we'll just get the hell out of dodge. And we're going to see Ace Jack and Pocket Queens, so we dodge the bullet there, efficiently so. It's always good to dodge the bullet. We have Ace-10 of hearts, so we're going to raise this combo. 8-5 of clubs on the second table. We're going to fold that one. And we could continuation bet this board with the ace-10. I think we're just going to check it back. Ace-high shows down pretty efficiently. We're definitely not making a 7 or a jack fold. We can call a river bet here pretty easily, or value bet if they check. They overbet the river, which is generally just going to be value. So it looks something like ace-jack or a 7 that checked twice. But nonetheless, we're rope-a-doped into calling. And they made a boat on the turn with pocket sixes. So yeah, like I said, generally when you see a sizing like that, it's just we're kind of fucked in a sense. We're not going to be able to fold our ace. They might be value betting a worse ace. We don't know anything about their bet sizing. You know, it just kind of is what it is. They generally don't have any bluffs there. It's just value. And we're mainly calling there because we can beat parts of their value range if they have them in. If they overbet there with an ace. I mean, clearly it's a polarizing bet sizing, but not everybody knows that is a thing. Not everybody knows that they shouldn't be overbetting a weak ace in that spot. We flop a flush here against Dr. Rungood. We're going to put the check raise in. Jack on the turn doesn't do very much. Honestly, we don't expect to get a ton of action here against Dr. Rungood. Pretty fair run out for us to bet turn and bet river, though. Just kind of assume he either has the ace of spades calling the turn, or he had a jack to check back the flop, something like 10-jack offsuit with the 10 of spades. You know, in some worlds we lose to pocket sixes with a spade, or not with a spade, but pocket sixes that called erroneously. Not many ways that we're beat there, so we get the 2 streets in. That's pretty good. Ace-deuce offsuit. We're not going to be playing this combination too frequently. We will raise it up against Dr. Rungood, though. And we're just going to fold. Against Shag, we kind of lack playability with ace-7 offsuit. Even though I said I would just isolate him with ace-6 offsuit a little bit ago. He's a bit of a wild man, honestly. He's a bit of a wild man, a bit of a maniac. And against those players, just having stronger hands is going to make us more money. So taking something like ace-7 offsuit or ace-6 offsuit, which are some of the worst ace-highs, and just getting rid of them is pretty reasonable to do, making sure we're playing our suited combos. And, you know, we're not going to be folding much in general, but the wilder your opponent is, having a bit of a tighter range is never a bad thing. Having stronger hands, because stronger hands weather the storm of unpredictability better than weaker hands do. So clearly, if we're just going to have every ace in the deck, and we're just going to have like king 6 and just a bunch of trash, you know, offsuit, just high card, whatever, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to maneuver than if we have hands that strictly have more playability, more equity, just in general. Those are the types of combos that you can get out of line with when you have good control over your opponent. If you have a pretty good idea of when they're doing one thing versus another, folding, calling, then it makes a lot of sense to play more hands because you have more control over them, which means you're not going to get in a ton of tricky spots, just not a lot of unpredictability going on. But once you got that guy like Shag who's just kind of doing all kinds of weird shit, weird bet sizings, playing a little bit tighter and just kind of catching him when he's doing that weird unpredictable stuff, it just makes a lot of sense. We've seen him use overbets when he likes his hand, but he did overbet a flush draw on the turn in that queen-jack hand. We're going to fold the 6-5 offsuit in the big blind, and we're going to fold 10-3 offsuit. We're going to fold the 8-deuce offsuit combination. Alright, sexy cat's meow against shag with 50 cents in the pot. Half pot bet. We're going to get a fold from shag here. 2 flush draws, all kinds of straight draws. 3 of clubs pretty much does nothing. So she bet checks. We've won. We're going to continue playing here, guys. We've been playing for an hour. We're up 27 funky ass dollars. I'm going to raise the deuces here on the button. I didn't see what they had in the last hand because it interrupted us, but that's okay. That's okay. We're raising the deuces. We're going to be getting rid of the queen deuce. Can't do much with that. Yeah, we're going to defend here with deuces, and hopefully we flop a set. We don't. We beat ace-king, but it's a rough path to showdown. So we're probably just giving up against Dr. Rungood. And when he checks here, is he checking over pairs? Not entirely sure, so we're going to start by betting. I would assume that he does not fold ace-king, but maybe he never checks an overpair. I just know that betting here is going to be a little bit better than checking. Checking is going to be messy. He gets to decide what he wants to do for sizing on the turn in the river. If he has a range wider than what we think, we could just win the pot and avoid having to go to showdown. So even though that our hand isn't exactly in the best shape equity-wise, and he could be checking stronger combos, and maybe he check jams with ace-king or some other weird shit, at the end of the day, he checked on a board that's not great for a guy 3-betting unless he's got pretty good balanced ranges. And a bet for us is going to give us more control over the hand, and we also can just win the pot the way that we did. So we bet he could fold. If he doesn't fold, we have an easy fold to a check raise, and if he calls, then we get to see the turn card, and if he checks to us on the turn, then we get to check back and see a river card, or we can decide to keep bluffing with our hand if we think that's the best play. A lot of ways that can play out, but starting with a bet versus a check is generally going to be the best strategy. And if we see that our opponent has too much interaction with his checks, then we're going to use a little bit more balance for the most part, instead of just betting every single time they check. But if he's never checking over pairs, and he's never check calling with ace-king, you know, of course we don't care about him check calling with ace-king when we have deuces, as much as if we just were stabbing with something like queen-jack. But you kind of get the idea. Queen king over here. We are going to 3-bet if red cobra raises. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet him. We're deep. He folds. We have a limp from the cat's meow. We're going to fold the 3-6 and an isolation raise. We're going to fold there as well. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up at the blinds here, guys. Can we sit out? Next big blind. We're going to raise it up with Jack-8 offsuit on the button. But yeah, we're going to wrap it up with the next blind and call it a session, guys. Call it a session. Take that one down. Can't complain. They're getting all the money in on this board where we block one of the sets. King, queen of spades against top pair. Wow. Wow. All right, well, there you have it. We're going to raise it up with our king-jack. Play one more hand after this one. We're going to play one more hand on the other table as well. And then we will bid you farewell. We have the king of clubs here. We have the gut shot. It's a good board texture in general for us to be betting. We can make somebody fold a 9 or a hand that's slightly ahead of us. So it's a pretty good spot for us to be continuation betting this board, specifically with the king of clubs. If we didn't have the king of clubs here, we'd be checking back at a higher frequency and maybe attacking their checking ranges some. That's going to be it for us on this table. Oh man, we got roasted. We got the big blind here. Alright, well, we'll sit out next hand. Suck. God damn it, it sucks. 10 cents. Down the drain. That means we're going to have to win this hand. We're going to have to go crazy. We've got the 4-8 of hearts. Hopefully they just fold. I'll have to 3-bet if they don't. Fantastic. That's perfect. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me. And if you check out, I'm going to be streaming on the 22nd and the 24th on Entertops. If you guys want to check that out. But yeah, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time.